Okay, hi, and happy Human Rights Day. Thank you to OR Books and DM25 and all the other people who have helped put this event together and this book together. So just want to say here on Human Rights Day, we're going to talk about one of the most prominent political prisoners in the West right now, and that's Julian Assange. He's the WikiLeaks publisher who's been imprisoned in Belmarsh in London since April 2019. He is wanted there not for any UK charges or anything to do with anything else except for a US extradition request. Trump's Department of Justice wants to extradite him to the United States, where he would then face charges under the Espionage Act and the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and he would face over 175 years in prison, all for publishing truthful information in the public interest. These are the 2010 disclosures from Chelsea Manning about the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, the state diplomatic cables, and Guantanamo Bay detainee assessment briefs. These are incredibly important exposures of war crimes, corruption, abuse, and he's been lauded for these publications around the world. But in the United States, he is wanted. And so we have to defend him. We have to fight back against this attack on the First Amendment. And that's where We Are Millions comes in. We Are Millions began as an online collection of black and white photos of supporters, famous and not, young and old, all around the world. People explaining why they support and stand with Julian Assange. And so these portraits have been hung in galleries across Europe. And thanks to OR Books, they've now been published in a new collection. There are hundreds of the portraits. The proceeds support the Courage Foundation and the campaign to defend Julian Assange. And right now at OR Books, actually, you can purchase this along with another recent publication in defense of Julian Assange for 20% off. But so we're going to talk a little bit about the book, about why it's coming out now, why it's important to support Julian Assange. But first, we'll hear a little bit from the project's creative director, Predrag.
Hi, thank you. The aim of our participative art piece was to show global solidarity with the imprisoned journalist. Him, who in my opinion made the biggest global impact and contribution to world's peace and human rights. He's not paying heavy price for that, and he became a hero of ordinary people, and also got like really powerful enemies. As I'm being very proud of the success of the campaign and big participation by mostly people of Europe and US, I'm sad that we haven't managed to reach Latin America, Asia, Africa, to show actual global support for Assange. And I hope in the next editions we will improve that and expand. In this book you will find some beautiful remarks on how his journalism changed people's lives. But beyond the words, take a look at the people's eyes and facial expression while holding this sign. You'll see so much more. Like We Are Millions displays a diverse multitude of people, ordinary folk, and very prominent cultural and political figures. We stand together to illuminate through this collective action something that dominant media have been trying to conceal over the years. And this means global solidarity for Assange. I personally don't believe that we can build a greater future if it doesn't have foundation in truth. And these difficult times, it may seem hard to relate to this, the truth will set us free, but we, who are millions, together with Julian Assange, believe that is how it's going to be. And I would like to thank everyone who took part in this campaign, took photo, shared this campaign, and finally Richter and all books for publishers. And thank you, Nathan, from Courage Foundation, and great guests we have here on the panel. Thank you for all DM activists who kickstarted this together with us, and all books, of course, for publishing. Yeah, that's from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Predrag. So we're joined now by three prominent figures who are featured in the book. We have Ben Cohen, co-founder of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream, and now an activist. He's working with me on AssangeDefense.org. We have Angela Richter, a theater director in Berlin, and we have author Chris Hedges, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. And we're going to talk about Julian Assange and why these people support him, why they're in the book. So Ben Cohen, can we start with you? Just talk about what drew you to this case and how you got involved.
For me, Julian Assange is a hero. He's the person who is letting us know what our government is doing in our name and with our money. And, it's a democracy. He's the person who is letting us know. The people ought to know what's going on. And yet the government does these horrible things in our name, and they want to keep it a secret from us. I spent some time with Julian when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, and he was very generous with his time. I thought I'd go in and talk with him for 15 or 20 minutes. We ended up talking for 3 hours. He's an incredibly caring and intelligent guy, and courageous. And he, for his courage and for exposing what my government is doing, that I didn't know about and that I certainly don't want him to be doing, for that courage, he's being persecuted, prosecuted, smeared, and he believed that if he could just explain to people what was really going on, if he could just expose the truth, then the people would force the government to change what the government's doing. And I think that he was saddened to see that despite exposing what the government was doing, the government kept doing it. So this is literally a case of killing the messenger. And a lot of people think that the government is just trying to keep him locked up in jail. He's got health problems with COVID, that they're just trying to stretch this out so that they do actually kill him.
Right. We've learned in the last couple of weeks that COVID-19 is actually spreading into his prison wing. So he's absolutely at risk.
Yeah. And, his lawyers made an effort to have him let out of prison because of that risk, and they refused. I couldn't continue my life as normal, knowing that this hero, this guy who risked everything to get the truth out, is being prosecuted and is stuck in jail. And so I started up AssangeDefense.org, starting a kind of a full-fledged campaign, hired several people to work on getting the US to drop the indictment. That's what we all have to be doing. The only way it's going to happen is with a tremendous amount of pressure from all of us. And, in the process, I got to meet Nathan, who's done an amazing job, pretty much single-handedly, working to help Assange and help to get our government to act according to the principles that it says it acts. To get our government to walk the talk. If it weren't for Assange, I wouldn't know about the war crimes that our country has committed, and I wouldn't know about what's going on in Guantanamo. And these are things that we should all know, and we just need to get Assange out of jail. We need to get the U.S. to drop the indictment. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you for your support in this U.S. campaign. AssangeDefense.org, at the live blog there is where I reported on Julian Assange's recent extradition hearing. You can find that coverage there. You can also find videos explaining aspects of the case and aspects of his revelations. We have several branches throughout the United States, and you can get in touch there if you want to join or start one of your own. That's AssangeDefense.org. And Ben has been a huge help, and I really appreciate it. It's really good to see some organized activism here in the U.S. on this case, which has been largely silent heretofore, before this arrest especially. So let's turn now to Angela Richter, theater director in Berlin, who has worked with WikiLeaks and has talked about WikiLeaks and Assange for several years now. Angela, what drew you to this case, and can you just talk about your involvement?
Okay, thank you, Nathan. I got to know Julian like 10 years ago when I wanted to make a play about WikiLeaks. Because I like the idea, I thought it has a revolutionary potential, which it does. And so I somehow was lucky to get in contact with him, which wasn't so easy, but I actually bought him on eBay in a way, because WikiLeaks at that time, there was this huge banking blockade that they suffered. And so they started raising money through funny actions like meeting him for lunch along with Slavoj Žižek. And I was lucky to, in the second round, to win one of the seats. It was 8 seats. So that's how we first met. And at that occasion, I told him that I'm planning to do the play. And I didn't believe that he would work with me, because at the same time, he was turning down Alex Gibney, who is really a Hollywood documentarist. And but against my own expectation, he decided to work with me. So that's how we first met. And in the course of the last 10 years, I did like 3 plays all in all. The first was called Assassinate Assange. And and also while working together, we became friends. And I can only agree to everything that Ben said. And it's really horrifying to see what happened to him, because I was very close by. I went, as long as he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, I went to see him like every few months, in all these years. And I met him the last time like 4 months before he was arrested and dragged out of the embassy. And it was really bad to see what happened to him in the course of these years. Niels Melzer, the UN rapporteur on torture, he really confirmed that. And that he was really, besides being a very strong character and person, he was systematically, psychologically tortured and destroyed. So yeah, it was really difficult to witness that. And yeah, the sad climax of it is him sitting in this high security prison now. And I mean, he shouldn't be there in the first place. So yeah, that's how I met him. And I can only assure you that.
Angela. Yeah, so he's been in prison, but he's really been isolated for nearly a decade now, spending so much time arbitrarily detained in the embassy. And so we only really hear about him when visitors get to talk about him. It's kind of a one-sided, little bits of information at a time. So the media also has one view of him, and Alice Walker and Noam Chomsky, who are also co-chairs of our AssangeDefense.org have published a piece in the Independent just ahead of his extradition trial, talking about the need to focus on the principles at issue here rather than his personality. There are so many character smears, and I'm wondering if you could talk about Julian the person that you got to know, and how that contrasts with the media image that you had seen over the years.
Well, it has nothing to do with the image that is in the media. You know, for me, it became even a little bit like, you know, in the novel of Orwell, you know, 1984, where they say there is this way of thinking when you can think two different things at the same time, like, you know, and it can be true, like 2 and 2 is 4, but it could also be 5 or 3, you know, and all this is parallel truth. So that happened to me, you know. There was this person that I knew who was a person that I really liked. I had the best experience with him. He's a person who always treated me like equal, you know, although I'm a female, you know, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's not normal for females, you know. That's why I emphasize it. And he really helped me. He encouraged me, empowered me in so many ways. So I cannot say that anything is true what I read about him. But still, in my brain, there existed this second figure called Julian Assange, who only existed in my fantasy because of reading so many articles about him. And they existed parallel. And I always had to remind myself, oh, that's not a real person. That's someone that they invented, you know, more or less. And then it was very devastating to see that they followed the narrative of the government, of the people who prosecuted him. Actually, it is a textbook thing, like putting also the focus on his character, just to not see what he exposed, the war crimes, you know. And another thing that I want to add is, of course, he is a journalist, which we all know, and this is about freedom of information and freedom of the press. So if he gets to be draconically prosecuted, it will happen to every journalist in the world. So this is one thing. But this, of course, this is very important because there is no democracy without freedom of the press. On the other hand, in a normal democracy, freedom of the press is guaranteed. But what is a little bit overshadowed is also his fight for transparency. And because this is something which is not guaranteed in a democracy, you know, it's not at all, you know, because what is the case is that we are very transparent now to companies, to secret services, to the government. But they are opaque, you know, the governments, the companies, of course, Secret Service, okay, military and so on. We don't know what is going on. And he is fighting for transparency. And transparency should be a default in our society, because that is actually the revolutionary potential of it, you know, because if you fight for transparency, there will be no whistleblowers once it would be reached, you know, and it should really be the opposite that we have now. And that's also one of the reasons they try to get rid of him, I guess, because this is a danger to the status quo.
Yeah, I like to say his right to publish is our right to know, and you get to the fact that there's a lot more involved than just strictly for journalists. You know, the First Amendment doesn't have a carve out for any credentialed type of journalist. It's about journalism, the act. And implied within that is the readers of that journalism, the people, the public whose tax dollars fund these governments and therefore fund these crimes that are exposed. They deserve to know about them. And so you're right, he's also fighting against the massive classification regime in the United States that classifies ever more documents, keeping things ever more secret, and you know, delimiting the public from getting to be a part of that conversation. Chris Hedges, now maybe we could talk to you about how you got involved in this case, and we'll come back to Angela to talk about other aspects. Chris, you've been following this. I remember we met back in the Chelsea Manning trial. You've been on this case and this issue for a long time now. What drew you to it, and why?
I'm an old newspaper reporter. You know, I worked for the New York Times for 15 years. I was a foreign correspondent for the Times, and another 5 years for the Dallas Morning News. And I came at this, although I've also visited Julian in the embassy, and want to second everyone said about him as a figure, both personally and in terms of his moral courage. But I came at this because I realized how mortal. The attack on WikiLeaks was ultimately to the larger institution of journalism, and that's only been confirmed. You have seen censorship now become routine on the digital platforms, Facebook, Google, YouTube, through the use of algorithms. And of course, now, just this morning, there was an announcement that Facebook is removing video content that discredits the election. But of course, this just becomes, you always go after the outliers like Alex Jones, who's been banned from social media. I'm no friend of Alex Jones, of course, nor those who perpetuate the idea that the elections were fraudulent, at least in terms of vote count. They were fraudulent in terms that they're controlled by corporate money. But then you set up a kind of precedence, and that's been my own experience as someone who is a critic of empire and a critic of corporate capitalism. So algorithms have been used against myself and against the publications that I write for. This isn't speculation. A year ago, we did a graph at TruthDig where I used to write. We all went on strike when the publisher tried to fire the editor, Bob Scheer, and we were all fired. But before that, and it showed that impressions, so impressions are when you go to Google and you, for instance, type in the word imperialism. If I had written an article that dealt with imperialism recently, it would come up along with other stuff. Now it doesn't. And so the referrals by impressions had fallen over that 12-month period from over 700,000 to below 200,000. We saw, I found it very chilling, the efforts on the part of mainstream publications, including the New York Times, to discredit any information that would hurt the Biden campaign. So you had, for instance, within the New York Times, a regular description of the John Podesta emails, which had been published by WikiLeaks, as misinformation. Well, you know, journalistically, they're not misinformation. Those are emails are genuine. We saw the New York Post, which published some of the contents from Hunter Biden's discarded laptop, shut out by Twitter of its own account. And this, I think, if we want to look at the template for what's coming, all we have to do is look at what has happened to Julian Assange and to WikiLeaks. So you not only have this overt censorship, which is very dangerous. Glenn Greenwald, of course, resigned from The Intercept, which he founded, because the editors would not allow him to write about the Biden revelations from the Hunter Biden revelations from his laptop. And that's not conjecture, because Glenn, of course, posted immediately all of the traffic. And what happened to Glenn is exactly what happened to Julian. The textual evidence was incontrovertible. I mean, it was there. It was censorship. And the whole hierarchy of Betsy Reed and Naomi Klein and all these figures of The Intercept attacked Glenn in the same way that Julian was attacked. It was character assassination. It was just appalling. So I think we have to look at what's happened to WikiLeaks and what's happened to Julian as the template, that all of the tools which are now increasingly being directed against us, and as social unrest, which I think is inevitable in the United States, given the economic fallout from the pandemic and the inability to control either the pandemic or address in any real sense the economic fallout, you know, a stimulus package with no stimulus, and we're upwards of 70 million Americans are now in danger of being evicted, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened to WikiLeaks is that when it tried to release information, it got hit with botnets or distributed denial of service attacks. Malware goes after the website. The site is routinely shut down, so it can't serve its content. When WikiLeaks tried to hold press conference, there were long delays, or the connections were cut. Algorithms are aggressively used against information that WikiLeaks disseminates. Hosting services, this is Amazon, which removed WikiLeaks from its servers. And what happened on a personal level to Julian immediately after he released the Iraqi war logs, his bank accounts and his credit cards were frozen. And then in December of 2017, the anonymous funding channel to WikiLeaks, which was set up to protect the anonymity of donors, was shut down. And this all coincided with, as other people have mentioned, this smear campaign against Julian, which was given credibility by the mass media and filmmakers like Alex Gibney, who made a horrific, I ended my friendship with Alex when I publicly called it agitprop for the security and surveillance state, which is what it was. It was appalling. So I feel on a personal level for Julian, who I know and care for and respect, but I also have this and have long been involved in this case and Chelsea Manning, because I know that they start with Julian and WikiLeaks, but then they come for us, and that's precisely that process is already underway. So there is a kind of deep self-interest as a journalist in terms of fighting for WikiLeaks and fighting for Julian, because we're really fighting for ourselves.
Thank you, Chris. And let's come back to the precedent in a little bit. But while we have Ben here, I would like to get your take on his comments about the outgoing Trump administration and incoming Biden administration. What do you think are our vector points to pressure the U.S. here? Oh, you're muted. Sorry. You're muted. Yeah.
It is. Aha.
There you go.
All right. Yeah, I think that this is a particular moment in time when there's two presidents that we can appeal to get the U.S. to drop the indictment. Obama considered indicting him, but then he decided that, well, we can't really indict him because of what they called the New York Times problem, that if we indict Julian for publishing leaked information, we'd have to indict the New York Times, who publishes leaked information all the time. I mean, that's pretty much the source material for a huge percentage of the articles that we see in the mainstream press is leaked information. And so Obama decided not to prosecute him because of the New York Times problem. And, I think that that's a real opportunity to pressure Biden because he seems to, support most everything that Obama was doing. I think that a big part of the problem is that, we're talking about digital online stuff. And the people that are kind of prosecuting Assange are old people who are not used to digital online stuff, and they're scared of it. But the reality is that digital online stuff today is what a newspaper was yesterday. And, as Chris mentioned very eloquently, if we allow this persecution of Assange to stand, it's just the beginning of essentially censorship of all of our media. I mean, it's the beginning of the end of the free press. And, the reason for the free press was so that the people could hold the government accountable. And if you ain't got no free press, you ain't got no people holding the government accountable. And I don't know what that is, but it ain't democracy.
Right. I guess we shouldn't be surprised that they would go after a Julian Assange, a WikiLeaks for embarrassing them. And as Chris Hedges, somebody who's not well liked, like an Alex Jones. But the point here is beyond Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, this prosecution could affect all of us and other journalists too. Chris, maybe you could talk about just what this would mean for investigative journalism. This is an Australian citizen, we shouldn't forget, that the US wants to extradite, who is working in Europe. He was not in the US at the time. So the US is trying to say they can prosecute anyone around the world for what is published beyond its borders. What are the global implications there?
Right, it does set a very dangerous legal precedent, which you correctly point out. Julian is not an American citizen. WikiLeaks is not a US-based publication. I don't see how the Espionage Act, therefore, can apply to either WikiLeaks or Julian, but that's all right. Going all the way back to Obama's, I would argue, misinterpretation of the 2002 authorization to use military force act as giving the executive branch the right to assassinate US citizens, which the Obama administration did in Yemen with Anwar al-Awlaki and later his 16-year-old son. There has been a complete corruption of the rule of law. That's part of what's happened with the collapse of the American judiciary. So yes, it sets up, you're correct, you're exactly right. It allows the state to carry out, in essence, kidnapping, extraordinary rendition of any figure who publishes, and that's what Julian is, in essence, a publisher, publishes information that exposes the inner workings of the empire and power. I was an investigative journalist for the New York Times. I still have friends who do investigative journalism, and investigative journalism into the centers of power is largely ended. And Obama was quite aggressive in using the Espionage Act against whistleblowers 9 times. The Espionage Act was passed by Woodrow Wilson in 1917. It's roughly the equivalent of the British Foreign Secrets Act. It's about passing state information to hostile actors, hostile powers that would use it. And up until the Obama administration, it was used 3 times against whistleblowers, including Daniel Ellsberg, although he never finally went to trial. And then it was exploded under the Obama administration. I think we forget that Biden and Obama, their assault on civil liberties, when you add it all up, was in fact worse than the assaults under George W. Bush. And what's happened is that because of wholesale surveillance and because of the aggressive use of the Espionage Act, investigative journalists can't get sources. This is why Snowden, when he released his material, immediately left the country because he knew, because of we're all followed and monitored 24 hours a day. I mean, it's very easy to find out who carried out that leak. And then you apply the Espionage Act, which is, Snowden has been charged under the Espionage Act, to put these people away for the rest of their lives. So we already have a crippling, I would even say, crushing of traditional independent investigation by journalists into the mechanisms of power, and that's why hackers, people like Jeremy Hammond or Chelsea Manning or others, become so important. I sued Barack Obama over Section 1021 of the National Defense Authorization Act, which he signed into law, which overturned the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act, which had prohibited the military from being deployed on American streets and used as a domestic police force. We actually won, surprisingly, the lawyers, Carl Mayer and Bruce Efron in the Southern District of New York. And my good friend Cornel West came and sat next to me through the whole trial, since I was 5 hours having federal lawyers trying to destroy me. We won, and then the Obama administration, the NSA lawyers came and demanded that Judge Catherine B. Forrest lift the temporary injunction in the name of national security. But they were in a kind of quandary because this was a black and white legal situation. And so what they did in the Second Circuit, it goes to the appellate and then it can go to the Supreme Court, is they waited months and months because they didn't want to rule on a clear violation of constitutional law. And so what they did is denied my standing. And that's the tactic that they use to shut down cases like this. I sat through the Jeremy Hammond trial. He hacked into Stratfor, which is a private security company. And actually the exchange of emails that he released became vital to my own trial in Section 1020, challenging Section 1021, because there were conversations between the private security firms and Homeland Security about how to target or tie left-wing groups directly to terrorist groups in the Middle East, and then use terrorism laws to go after them. So we're on the cusp of a very frightening dystopia. If you go back and read that book that Julian put out a few years ago, Cypherpunks, he kind of unfortunately knows precisely where we're going. He himself in the long term is not very optimistic about the creation of a kind of global police state, which is now far advanced in places like China. So, you know, this is really the fight for our lives. You know, what's been done to him personally breaks my heart, because I will second again what Angela and Ben and you all know, which is that he is a remarkable human being. I debated the chief counsel for the former chief counsel for the NSA at the Oxford Union on whether Snowden was a traitor or a hero. And I told Julian I was going to come into London and visit him on the way. And he said, "Oh, come a day early and I'll prep you for the debate," which is probably why we won. So no, on every single level, this is on a human level, on a political level, because it's such an egregious violation of both domestic and international law. And then, of course, speaking as a journalist, it's just absolutely terrifying and appalling. And the consequences of it for the rest of us are really, I cannot stress enough how utterly severe they are, because if they set this legal precedent and in essence jail, imprison for life a publisher, and I published classified information on the front pages of the New York Times, then it's over. And anybody who thinks they won't use it against the New York Times, or, you know, I was with James Goodell, by the way, and Daniel Ellsberg. We all did a panel together on WikiLeaks and on Julian. So Goodell was the lead counsel for the New York Times during the Pentagon Papers, and he's as terrified as I am. So this comes from people who actually have, you know, a deep understanding of constitutional law. You know, I think he would echo absolutely I know he would echo absolutely everything I just said. I'm sure somewhere on YouTube, if they haven't taken it down or something, you can watch it. But that really, I cannot stress enough. This is a really crucial and frightening moment in human history, and the inability to free Julian, and the inability on the part of us who care about the free flow of information, and who care about journalism, and who care about holding the powerful accountable. And we know through human history what happens when you don't hold, the powerful are not held accountable. I studied classics, you know, go back and read Suetonius or Livy or anyone else. Then it's a recipe for despotism. And that is really, you know, the battle. It's the battle of our lives, this battle.
You mentioned James Goodale, and he actually has written a couple pieces as well, drawing parallels between Ellsberg case and Assange, including the fact that Nixon's plumbers broke into Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office, and that was actually part of the reason that he was not convicted. And the parallel that he draws is that the CIA has been found to be spying on Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy, and he wondered if he should be let off on that alone. But you also mentioned Jeremy Hammond, and we should note and celebrate that he's actually finally been released to a halfway house, but released from prison after 9 long years in jail, and I'm really happy to see that. And so Chris paints a dystopian picture. It's not looking good, but and it's easy to feel powerless against this, massive U.S. and UK, multiple governments mobbing up against one publisher. But we can do something about it. We can fight back about it, and we're organizing support here in the United States. But it's been going on a lot longer in Europe. And Angela, I was wondering if you could talk about what the support for Julian is like across Europe, and what we can learn from that. Oh, your mic is muted.
Well, there are different groups who protest actually every week. I know there's a group, Candles for Assange in Berlin. There's a group in Hamburg for Assange. They make these vigils. I mean, I'm really very astonished how people are doing it. And then there is the initiative of Predrag, this book that we are now here launching, and also there are also some of journalists also who are supportive of him. I mean, I started writing myself. I actually, through him, I also became a journalist. And now that we have the pandemic, I'm basically writing, you know, because there is no theater. And so many people are engaged. There are funds, and there is, I think, really a lot of support from people. And thank God they didn't buy this narrative, you know, which was very strong. And I think what did help to change the view on it was also really a big article about, and also the insistence of Nils Melzer and other people like Stefania Maurizi, the journalist, who were really very, very supportive for many, many years and helped really to change the public view, which was really important. And of course, we need more of that, because I think that still all this toxic misinformation that went on for so many years, they really prevent people from supporting it. And also another aspect might be that people, when they are not directly affected themselves, it's very difficult. It's kind of theoretical. So yeah, I think it cannot be enough of support, but still there is hope. And I'm also, although I agree with Chris, everything that he said is really true. And yeah, I'm hoping for more and more support, and we will just keep doing it. And yeah, and sometimes unexpected things happen, you know. Who would have thought that the Soviet Union would collapse? Or, I mean, all the people in France never expected the French Revolution. So I'm really hoping also for some surprises and support that we still don't know what will happen, you know. So yeah, I'm keeping the faith and just encouraging everyone to take part and support it and keep fighting.
Thanks, Angela. And yeah, I want people to know they can still participate in We Are Millions. It's an online compendium of portraits in addition to the art galleries it's been in, and in this photo book. You can go to orbooks.com to get the publication of the portraits so far and quotes from many of these high-profile supporters about why they support Julian and what's at stake here. But you can also add to the online collection that's still growing, wearemillions.org. And so you can just add your own photo right there and become a part of this large collection. Ben Cohen, can you talk about a little bit about the US support here in Assange defense? We have lots of branches growing, and you feel optimistic about building support here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what's really critical is for anybody who supports Assange is to make sure that your email, that you've entered your email at assangedefense.org, so that we can, unite and do, whatever kind of mass activities are possible. I think Assange Defense is in the process of getting a bunch of articles placed here in the U.S. And I think, it's as hackneyed as it is to say, phone calls and especially in-person visits. Well, I guess you don't do that anymore, but phone calls to, political leaders really count. And it doesn't take that many phone calls to get them to pay attention. But, this issue of freedom of the press is, something that is a basic part of the United States, and something that we all grew up with, understanding that this is what made the U.S. As good as it is. And I think that people need to understand that it's not just about prosecuting Assange. It's about destroying freedom of the press. So, yeah, I mean, I believe that there are, I mean, I know that there's millions and millions of people around the world, and I think there's millions of people just in the United States that support WikiLeaks and support Assange, but they're not organized. We don't have everybody's emails, and that's really what's needed. I mean, one of the concerns I have is that, you know, there's so many people who have been so passionate about trying to help Assange that there's a bunch of groups that have sprung up, and I'm concerned that they're, you know, we're not doing a good enough job of uniting all of those groups so that we can all work together. You know, I've been speaking lately with Julian's brother, and there's a documentary that's coming out, and that's going to be on BBC, called Father, and it's pretty much following Julian's father around as he's doing everything he can to save his son, and we're trying to get that. You know, we're trying to get some platform, you know, like Netflix in the U.S. to also host that documentary. So really what we need is for more people, I think, to understand that it literally is our freedom and freedom of the press that's on the line.
Thank you, Ben. Let's look here at a couple of questions from the audience. I have one that I think could be addressed to Chris as he was talking about the precedent. This John Crampner asks, if China doesn't like what an American reporter or American outlet publishes, can they use an Assange precedent, hypothetically, we hope it doesn't happen, to grab that journalist? Is that how that would work internationally? Oh, you're muted also, Chris.
Yeah, I think that is precisely our fear, that there is once the United States carries out an activity like this against a journalist that or a publisher that disseminates information that exposes criminal activity, which is what WikiLeaks did, of the ruling elites of a particular country, they will replicate it. I mean, I think this raises a whole other issue about how everything around this case is eviscerating any pretense of the rule of law, not just the rights of a free press. And these illegalities are perpetrated not only by the United States, of course, and we spoke a little bit about that, but also by the Ecuadorian and the British governments. The moment that Julian was seized, you know, he was on sovereign, he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, he was on sovereign territory. And so, you know, what was Theresa May was the prime minister. I mean, what was the legal basis that British police burst into this embassy and seized a political prisoner? I mean, under what Ecuadorian law did President Lenin Moreno terminate Julian's right of asylum as a political refugee? I mean, and Julian, by the way, was a naturalized citizen of Ecuador. You know, under what law did Trump demand the extradition, who's not a US citizen, as we mentioned? So I think what we're seeing is a breakdown, not just of, or you know, a direct assault on the freedom of the press, but also a breakdown in the rule of law. So yes, I think that's a, you know, a very important point.
Thank you, Chris. We have a couple more questions from the audience. I'm just checking here, but Angela, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about WikiLeaks' journalism and why they are gone after specifically. You talked about going against this massive classification system, but it's also the scientific journalism. It's the idea of bringing the public a seat at the table, really showing us the source documents and allowing us to view it for ourselves. Is that an important aspect of WikiLeaks' journalism for you?
Yes, it is, absolutely, because I think it is something that we are totally not used to, you know, because people are used to that they somehow always don't get the original material, but everything that is selected by journalists. And of course, there are good journalists who do a good job on that, but still, I absolutely like the idea that as someone who, as each individual could go there and look at the evidence themselves, being the documents and so on. I think this is something which is very important, and I know from Julian personally that his dream was to have something like the Alexandria bibliothèque, what it's in English, you know, like a big archive of documents, you know, for the, also not for now for the people to look at things, but also for the future, you know, when people look back at history, so that history cannot be violated. And of course, scientific journalism, for me, it's something quite utopian, because let's be honest, you know, truth is a lot of work. That I realize always when I get approached often by people who are conspiracy theorists. And I don't mean the real conspiracies. I really think the rather cuckoo stuff. And they are all not looking at the real documents at WikiLeaks. They're not browsing there and looking for the truth, because the truth is somehow exhaustive. And it's really a lot of work to pay attention. So they rather watch some weird video on YouTube, you know, on YouTube University, and draw their conclusions. So what I'm saying is that I think we will need a lot of efforts to kind of re-educate people in the way that they feel empowered by information and feel they don't need someone to patronize them on it, you know. It's not that I'm saying that all journalism is bad, in the opposite, but on the other hand, now that we have digitalization and everyone can get access to information, I think this is the journalism of the future, you know. So, and I think people will more and more adapt to it, to the idea that they can really have access to documents, and that is also what total transparency is about. Yeah. I think it's a really revolutionary potential in it.
Thank you, Angela. Let's just before we close here, let's hear once more from Predrag, the artist and the creative director behind this project. Can you just talk about your work putting these portraits up in exhibitions, and how others who want to do the same can replicate that here in the United States and elsewhere?
Yeah, thank you. It was a great experience to put this from kind of digital environment in a physical space, and to feel this energy when people like come on this exhibition, take photos, and that was like really unique, like, you know, kind of this expanding this dimension of the exhibition. Like, and then as it started, like in Bergen here in Norway, and it was very interesting. Like, you know, first exhibition was like censored. And then it was like a big outrage from, like, you know, art unions, you know, freedom defense groups, and it was like really amazing. Like, it was very vague. Apparently, the journalists themselves actually were protesting and even calling it, like, you know, fake art, and saying things like WikiLeaks is kind of yeah, like doing propaganda for kind of Russia. Like, they never published any documents about it, but in fact, like, you know, people corrected like these journalists right away. Like, well, you actually don't pay attention. Like, they have published like embarrassing materials about Russia. So yeah, that's calling it fake art. But in general, it was like beautiful. Like, you know, big kind of reopening of the exhibition, and even brought like a lot of press about the case, and then following this, like, it was happening in media city, where like all the media have offices like here in Norway. And it was especially embarrassing. But this street exhibition, that's also kind of unique because people are not used to seeing exhibitions of, like, on the streets. So you have like some construction walls which are very long, and then like we put a lot of like materials for reading and portraits. It was like the participation of Saken, like local art collective. That was like beautiful, beautiful energy around this setting up the exhibition, and how people felt like, you know, kind of what's like, you know, there's no author of the exhibition, but every one of us participating like feels like part of it. Like that's kind of, that was, I think, also the success of it. And then later when we did it in Geneva and in Berlin, like, you know, it's just really beautiful exhibitions and meeting all these people. Yeah, that's and unfortunately we now cannot continue because we had plans for Rome and for perhaps in Brussels and Copenhagen, but we cannot now organize due to virus problem. But yeah, so now hopefully people will join still and participate by submitting their photos online.
Right. In the meantime, people can add to the online collection, but we do want to plan for after COVID and hope that we can get these back in galleries. You know, Assange Defense now has a branch in Denver, Colorado, and we actually got a couple portraits up there at a nice exhibition. So there's absolutely interest in this, and after the pandemic and restrictions, we can get it back in galleries. I just want to thank all of you for being part of this, and I want to remind all the viewers that you can support the campaign to defend Julian Assange with the purchase of this book with We Are Millions at orbooks.com, but also the book In Defense of Julian Assange. You can buy them together now. And I really just want to thank OR Books for putting this event together, DM for supporting the exhibition, Frit Ord as well. And thank you to our panelists, to Ben Cohen, Angela Richter, Chris Hedges, and the creative director, Predrag. Thank you all so much. Take care.